staff.
Thank you very much. With that, I will bring it back to the board. Director Okrepke.
Thank you, Chair. Two things, one quick, one not so quick. The first quick thing, the prioritization in the packet, is that the final prioritization or is?
We are still working with your staff to make those corrections and to make sure they're in the correct order.
All right. My staff has asked me to make sure that is put in the minutes so that it's not approved as is with the arbitrary prioritization. Thank you. Regarding the TFCA funds, we'd like to see that cut out of the bundling of cycle 2. We've used that for youth free fares for our city bus in years past, and then we moved over to the, excuse me, I have to look at the acronym, LCTOP for that, but with the cap and trade negotiations going on, that may not be viable going forward. So we may want to apply for that so that our kids can continue to ride city bus free. So if it's okay with the rest of the board, I'd like to cut the TFCA funds out of the cycle 2 bundling.
Staff has heard those concerns from Santa Rosa staff as well, and we're definitely cognizant of the issues being raised, and we'll be coming back for further discussion and input before we make any decisions on that.
Director Lowe.
Is there any work to be done on flood prevention on that potential roundabout or signal and to address that?
Yes, so we are currently looking at various studies to essentially create a virtual floodplain of the area, since the FEMA maps are not very accurate, they're very old. And so we are looking at what potential impacts the project would have on the existing recurring flooding that occur in that area. There's an existing culvert just west of the intersection that would be lengthened by the project and potentially replaced. But we have definitely approached the project to try to avoid any future flooding issues caused by the project and be able to accommodate the existing detours that occur when the highway is shut down by traffic from flooding at the Highway 12 and 121 intersection by the fire station.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. The casino in Rohnert Park is moving ahead very rapidly. And we may be looking to reprioritize our two priorities. That roundabout at Redwood Drive and Rohnert Park Expressway is less than a block from the casino, and they are moving along quite rapidly. So working with staff right now, but we probably, like Jeff, would like to have another opportunity to take a look at those priorities, as we move forward, because we may be flip-flopping that.
Great. Other questions or comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I will ask if there are any members of the public in person who wish to comment on this item. Seeing none, is there anyone online?
Yes, Madam Chair. It went down, so.
False alarm.
There you go.
All right. With that, I will bring it back for further discussion and for a motion. Director Giudice?
So moved, Rohnert Park. There's no discussion.
Second. All right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, that does carry unanimously. Thank you so much, David. Appreciate it. And with that, I would like to actually handle 5.2 and 5.3 a little bit differently. They are still technically separate items, but after discussing with Executive Director Cameron, we're actually going to have the presentations back to back because they do interplay a bit, and we don't want questions for one actually could be answered by the second presentation. So it'll be, I think, about 25 minutes combined between the two presentations. We will then offer separate opportunities for public comment on both of those items and then bring it back to the board, and we can ask all of our questions and deliberation together. So if you've got questions on the first, jot them down, and then they might actually be answered by the second. So with that, I believe Dana is going to introduce this one.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and directors. So The SCTCA is responsible for implementing the Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure program, which is focused on education and encouragement. And that's through our grant from MTC through the One Bay Area program. The Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition has been our contractor to implement the program since 2018, when we took over administering the program from the Department of Health. And they were the contractor under the Department of Health previously. So as it sounds like you are aware, Christina Panza from Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition will be presenting a report out on the last year's program for the 24-25 school year. And Margot Ocañas will second be presenting on some planning work we are doing around Safe Routes to School infrastructure, as well as some of the programming looking forward. So with that, I will let Christina give the presentation.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you, board. I really appreciate you having me here. I think maybe can I hold the mic? Yeah, I think that'd just be great. Because I want to be able to see my screen. All right, you can advance the slides. This slide, it's just a great overview of the benefits of Safe Routes to School. In the interest of time, I'm skipping through, but it's worth a review on your own time. Next slide. As you may be aware, SCBC's contract to implement, Dana just said, the SRTS program is funded by the One Bay Area grant. We're now in the 8th year, as Dana said, of a 9-year contract. And as of June 2025, we've utilized 71.55% of the funds available. Next slide. I think this is the same slide you have. I know we had to update it slightly. Next slide. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Last slide. There. This slide is a snapshot of the total cost of the Safe Routes to School countywide program during the 24-25 fiscal year. In other words, it's what we billed to SCTA through OBAG and or billed or received from other contracts or grants. So you can see that OBAG funds a large program of the portion of the program, but we're also supplementing our countywide activities with other funding sources. So these other sources do vary from year to year and are not guaranteed. Next slide. This is just a better, like a nicer visual of that breakdown. So you can see that the OBAG was 84% of the countywide Safe Routes activities. Last year, we had a 1-year grant from Sonoma County Department of Health Services, which funded 10% of our contract. The town of Windsor, we had a contract with, which funded 4% of our contract, and the rest was a mix of other small grants and contracts. Next slide. As I referenced in the text of the funding, the first funding slide, Safe Routes countywide costs have increased every year, with the exception of the 2 years impacted by COVID. This is due in part to rising costs and in part to increased demand for services that we've continued to meet from year to year. Our program has grown every year, and the OBAG portions of costs, I said, vary from year to year, depending on level of funding from other services. Okay, next slide. So as many of you are aware already, our program consists of a lot of components: evaluation, encouragement, education, support for engineering and enforcement. I'm not going to read through this list, but you can go back to it for a reference. I'm going to elaborate on each program component during the rest of my presentation. Next slide. Great. This slide illustrates our program components in timeline mode. So you can see we've got a lot of overlapping initiatives, and we're busy year round. Even though it's a school program, we are prepping, we're coordinating, we're implementing various aspects of the program year round. I'm going to start by talking about evaluation, since that's really what we begin each school year with. Next slide. We utilize evaluation of each of our comprehensive sites to determine the potential for active transportation and the best approach to the ease at that site. So we develop for every site a student address GIS map that shows where students live in relation to the school within the quarter, the half, the 1 and the 2 mile radius. Last year, we actually geocoded 75 schools to support not only our comprehensive enrolled schools, but also requests from either jurisdictions for grant funding or district requests. So next slide. And then we also, with every school that's comprehensively enrolled, we ask them to collect data on how many students are utilizing all forms of transportation. We do this in September, and teachers or volunteers ask the students how they arrive to and from school. So in this example from Meadow Elementary School, you can see that even though from the last slide, there were 54% of students living within the half-mile radius, but about 35% are walking and biking. So we look at that. We share this data with school personnel, district personnel, parents to help inspire action on encouragement and other initiatives at the site. And also just to identify, are there opportunities for other initiatives like walking school buses or bike trains, which I'll talk about in a minute. And this data for all of the schools that are enrolled in our programs is publicly available on our website. I could show you where to find it later. So in 24-25, we also continued to collaborate with the cities of Santa Rosa and Petaluma to conduct site assessments, otherwise known as walk audits at every school in each of those cities, well, continuing through every school. City staff in Petaluma and Santa Rosa have utilized these audits to identify barriers to walking and rolling to school and to make infrastructure improvements. For example, Santa Rosa estimates they've made about $100,000 in improvements this past year, some low-hanging fruit at some of the schools that were identified. And this year, the city plans to work toward over $250,000 in TDA grant funding for school infrastructure projects. Next slide. So our encouragement program, next slide. There we go. Our encouragement program consists of suggested monthly themed walk and roll to school days, generally on the first week of each month, and a monthly walk and roll to school challenge activity with a chance for students to be entered into a drawing for a fun prize. These were the themes from last year, from 24-25. We had 57 schools participate in our comprehensive encouragement program last year, which was up from 55 in 23-24. And schools can tweak the implementation of encouragement based on their capacity. Next slide. So in order to effectively promote our encouragement programs, we create promotional materials and infographics in English and Spanish to assist schools in promoting their events via Parent Square or emails or social media or more. An International Walk and Roll to School Day is our annual launch event. It's usually on the first or second Wednesday in October. In 2024, 61 schools participated in that event, and close to 7,000 students were reported to have walked and rolled to school. Next slide. So this is just an example of one of the challenge activities that complemented Ruby Bridges Walk to School Month, which was last November. It was a bingo challenge, and where they learned how to be safe and be seen, and they also learned about Ruby Bridges. And next slide. We also had an art contest. We have it every February. Our theme in February is Walk and Roll for Our Hearts. It's Heart Healthy Month. And in the next slide is just some of the artwork that came in our art contest, where students draw why they love to walk and roll and why it's good for their hearts, their minds, and their bodies. And we make a calendar that is distributed to the students and their parents and their principal and teacher and all of our enrolled champions. Next slide. Also in our encouragement program, we had Bike to School Day again last year. It's our 4th annual countywide Bike to School Day event. We had 54 participating schools, 1,294 students bike to school were counted, which was a 198% increase from the normal number of students that bike to school at those sites. Next slide. We also provided and continue to provide participating schools with resources and support to form walking school buses and bike trains where kids and parents and even teachers meet up and walk or bike to school together in groups. So in 24-25, we supported 24 schools in forming at least one walking school bus route and 19 in forming at least one bike train route. All right, next slide. And of course, we not only want to encourage kids to walk and roll, we want them to do it safely. We visit classrooms at the 2nd or 3rd, the 4th and 5th grade, and middle school levels with pedestrian and bicycle safety lessons. 2nd grade, we do pedestrian safety. 4th grade, we do bike basics. 5th grade, we do mapping and communications. And middle school, we do a drive your bike. And we scheduled lessons at 53 sites in 24-25, and we had 42 in 23-24. So we went up a lot in the number of schools that received lessons last year. Next slide. And we also, when I was saying fourth grade bike basics, with the fourth graders, we also get students outside of the classroom and on bike with a bike PE class that we call a bike rodeo. We did that with 40 schools in 24-25, 36 in 23-24. So again, that increased. Kids not only get trained on bike basics, but they have the opportunity to purchase and have fitted a low-cost brand new helmet, thanks to our partnership with Providence Health Foundation. And it's just a great day, and schools that receive the bike rodeo never want to not have it. Next slide. And at the middle school level, we do bike education and PE classes and or offer an after-school bike club. And we worked with 9 sites this past year. So that was really great getting those kids on bike and usually on the road. All right, next slide. Last spring, we also began development of a number of resources to address an increasing need for e-bicycle education. We now have a page on our Safe Routes website dedicated to these resources, and we're available to educate both students and parents, and we're really hoping to partner with other stakeholders to expand the education reach about e-bikes. Next slide. And we continue to have great demand for our Learn to Ride a Bike classes that we partner with Windsor, Petaluma, and Santa Rosa Parks and Recs to offer. We do those every month in each jurisdiction, except for the months of December, January, and July. And next slide. And we also continued with our family bike workshops and family rides, where we teach kids and families how to ride together on the road. So we get out on the road with parents and kids, and we did that a number of times last year in a number of jurisdictions. And finally, this past June, we held our Kids Bike Adventure Camp in Santa Rosa Recreation and Parks. It was a really amazing week with great breadth and depth to foster both current and future cycling enthusiasts and potential advocates. And next slide. We also continue to partner with bike shops to provide free bike safety checks and repairs for hundreds of kids per year through our bike rodeos and middle school bike ed. So like close to 1,000 bikes were repaired between middle school and fourth grade bike rodeos, and with 6 local bike shops engaged. And next slide. We are also out in the community as well. We do outreach at events. We do presentations at as many PTAs and school staff meetings as we can get to, community meetings. We facilitated task forces in Santa Rosa and Petaluma last year and the year before, and more. We reached over close to 1,600 people in 24-25. Next slide. The numbers on this slide reflect what has been taught this year at each of the following grade levels. So the total number of students that we directly educated last year with classroom lessons or on-bike community lessons, not like community outreach, but where we're actually on bike or in the classroom, was 8,915 students received education last year. And next slide. On our website, you can find engagement, GIS, travel tally data in the school travel plan section. So if you're on SonomaSafeRoutes.org and you go to the events and plans tab and you kind of scroll down to the little drop down menu, there's a menu called school travel plans. And if you click on any one of the schools in there, you can see all that data that I showed you and how the school engaged in the program last year. And we update that a couple times a year. So it needs to be updated for this year, but still last year's data. Next slide. This is our website again, SonomaSafeRoutes.org. I encourage you to check it out. You can see everything that we do up there, or what our current initiatives are, education, PSA videos, walking school bus, bike train, resources, travel plans, task force meeting invites, all the things that we do are up there. So check it out and reach out to me if you have any questions. And obviously I will be here to answer questions after Margot speaks. Margot, to you. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, board. Lovely to have the opportunity to continue the conversation around safe routes to school. So as Christine, it's quite all right. As Christina explained, there is a depth of education and encouragement activity that has gone on. And next slide, please. I wanted to remind you that we were the recipients of a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. Could you go back one slide just to make sure I haven't skipped anything? Perfect. We were the recipient of a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant for the fiscal year 23. It was called the Vision Zero Action Plan Planning Grant. It had 4 tasks, of which, just one moment, there is a version 2. No, it should be in the folder, sorry. No, maybe not in the presentation folder, but in the, oh, it does? Okay, next slide, please. Apologies for the break. Just want to make sure I'm giving you the latest and greatest. Okay, next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. There were 4 tasks in the grant. The Safe Routes to School work is the largest task at about 70% of the grant monies. So we have been busy at work and would like to sort of explain to you why we're expanding the program into infrastructure, how we got to the targeted schools, and also a continuation and an expansion of the non-infrastructure. Next slide, please. So as a quick sort of visual, the work that Christine and the team have done with Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition is in the green boxes. And the grant, this task 1 for the Safe Routes to School, is in the blue box. As you've heard, we have been doing a great job of building skills and training communities to come together, enhancing the safety education. It is now the time to take very seriously changing the infrastructure on those corridors and blocks around the school. So in fact, we can watch a real metric try to shift such that the volume of children that are in fact using active transportation can increase. Next slide, please. So what are the goals that are driving us for this infrastructure-oriented expansion of the program? One is we want to be data-driven in understanding where to focus our efforts. We have a county with about 204 schools, so let's make sure with our finite resources that we're directing them to the highest need school communities. And we want to be proactive. So I'll talk through the prioritization process that we've gone through. The other reason is we want to think more aggressively about how to be competitive in securing funding to build out the plans. As Christina referenced, she's done a great job, particularly in Santa Rosa and Petaluma, in capturing the input from the community, but we're needing to translate that into plans and potentially bundle them so our infrastructure asks are larger and more competitive with everyone else who's chasing the money. Third, I think it's important we have opportunities to expand our partnerships. I know that we've worked really successfully at the local level, but we're working quite hard at engaging the district superintendents and pitching before those unit groups, also getting city council members involved, just to spotlight the importance of Safe Routes to School in point 4, which is how Safe Routes to School in building out infrastructure and education components can help meet the district goals and city goals. So let's stop thinking about active transportation plans in one silo, Safe Routes to School in another, climate plans in another, but how can we talk about Safe Routes to School, helping them to achieve those milestones across multiple plans? Next slide, please. So where do we stand to date? Part of the grant for the task 1 section of Safe Routes to School, there's City of Healdsburg and countywide. City of Healdsburg work is well underway. We have site assessed all 6 schools, and the concept planning for Healdsburg will be finished in spring. We will then initiate the planning with the remaining county schools such that by the spring of 2027, when we finish the grant, as I will detail later in the presentation, we will have about 13 infrastructure plan projects ready to consider for funding. Next slide, please. Let's talk about where we're going to focus our energies. Next slide, please, with prioritization. So we met with the leadership team of the superintendents and confirmed which schools are in fact in operation. As you know, there have been school closures, et cetera. So I want to make sure that we're working with the true list of schools that are in operation. Next slide, please. Of the 204 schools that are operating in the county, about 40% of them are in the unincorporated area. So that's a lot of smaller locations. Not surprisingly, City of Santa Rosa accounts for nearly 30% of all the schools in the county. And combined, Santa Rosa, Petaluma, and Roner Park are approximately 50%. Next slide, please. And the distribution is about 80% with public. That's both the traditional and charter schools, and about 20% private. It is helpful to understand these typologies. Not surprisingly, private and charters generally tend to pull not just from the neighborhood. So we have to understand the dynamics of how children are traveling for each of those types of schools. Next slide. So how did we develop a calculation to rank these schools? And for this, I will turn to Angelica Roca, who is with Farron Pierce and has been a great partner in developing the methodology and the data indicators that we use. So Angelica?
Hi, everyone. Sorry about the delay. I was switched to panelist. Just want to confirm that you can hear me.
We can, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Margot. So as Margot mentioned, the top priority of this effort is to understand schools or school zones with the greatest need. Another goal that the consultant team was charged with was developing an approach that could be reused and reevaluated by SCTCA as design plans are completed and improvements are implemented. So with that, we developed a methodology that's regionally calibrated, and the results this resulted in identifying 6 indicators presented on your screen here that represent transportation, climate, and social equity needs. And each school in the county was analyzed and received a score based on these 6 indicators. We separated these indicators by road-based indicators and place-based indicators. The road-based indicators are indicators that are joined or exist along the roadway network, such as the number of killed or seriously injured bicycle and pedestrian crashes near schools, the number of roadway miles along the region's high injury network or high injury intersections near schools, and then place-based indicators, which are a variety of spatial geographies or places. And these are indicators that are at the school level or based on census geographies. So these are percent of youth living near a school, or statewide indicators such as the student health and climate adaptive need indicators. We also included an equity indicator, and that is the equity impact, which looks at the percent of students enrolled eligible for free or reduced priced meals. Next slide. So wanting to just sort of highlight at a high level how these different indicators are, what happens on the technical side. So this is a slide here presents a number of different maps here, but the key takeaway we're hoping to share is that indicators come in all shapes and sizes. And you see that on the left-hand side of your screen, we have data represented as points. On the middle, you see lines, and on the right, you see polygons. And so for all the indicators that we used, except free and reduced lunch, they were assigned directly which was assigned directly at the school level. We used a half-mile buffer. So you see the blue circle around Guerneville Elementary represents that half-mile buffer. And this is a common distance considered comfortable for students to walk to school. And it also helps be used as a proxy for enrollment boundaries, particularly in kind of the smaller rural areas like Guerneville. So this example, as I mentioned, is Guerneville Elementary, and wanted to illustrate how the different data is joined to the school geography. So beginning with points, the red dots on your screen are bikes and ped collisions. And this is a raw score that was calculated by counting the number of collisions that happen within that half-mile buffer. And then the score is normalized based on the maximum count for all the schools in the county. The second map on your screen is lines. And so this is the region's high injury network, where we counted the length of high injury network miles within the half-mile buffer, and then normalized the score against, again, all the schools in the county. The last map on your screen is polygons, and these are census block groups where we estimated the number of residents under 18 that are represented in each of the census block. And with that, I will pass it back to Margot.
Thank you, Angelica. So after doing the calculation, we were in fact had a, next slide, please. We were able to rank order literally from 1 to 204. I'm taking a slice of the top 100 just to represent, and again, not surprisingly, the heavy distribution of both the Santa Rosa schools and the unincorporated, accounting for nearly 60% of the top 100. Now, you'll remember this is a countywide Safe Routes to School effort, so we did want to spread the love. So we used this very detailed line by line breakout of the schools to next slide to think about how to use that ranked order to apply or to target schools within our 9 jurisdictions. So Healdsburg is grayed out because all of their schools are being done through the grant project anyway. What you'll see is the number in red on the far right column represents for that city, Roanoke Park, for example, their highest ranked schools started at 14. So then we looked at the next set of Roanoke Park schools that followed 14 and looked for schools that were in close geographical proximity to ranked number 14. Why do we do that? Because if there is an opportunity to bundle schools, not only can we do spot location treatments, but we can also develop corridor treatments. So we look at elementary schools relative to a middle school, relative to a high school. If they feed into each other, it makes sense to think about improving a neighborhood network. And again, that sort of bundled, more robust application tends to be more competitive going forward. So for each of those jurisdictions, there may be one school that gets attention or a bundle of, I'm sorry, an individual school coupled with a bundle. And you'll notice that the number in the parentheses represents how many are in the bundle. I'll go through the next slides. Next slide, Dawn. These are again in your packet, next slide please, which speak to what the individual schools are that roll up into a bundle. We have provided this presentation to the PAC and the TAC and our CAC, and so people are familiar with it. We've made sure to touch base with people in the city and make sure they're comfortable with these recommendations. But this now informs the remaining work plan for the infrastructure work of the grant, which will be wrapped up in spring of 2027. If you could go back just to the table, sorry, Dawn. What I wanted to call out is, as I said before, we will be in a place where 32 schools will have been touched through this process with infrastructure projects ready to go, 12 of them, in fact, by the close of the grant. If you'd like to slide down to the next set of schools, we can skip that one. No, we can skip that. And next to the, keep going, programs. So, because I want to be respectful of time. So as Christina shared, a lot of work on the safety education encouragement. Next slide, please. Through this grant, we were, one of the components was to revisit the programs. Are there ones that we're doing well? Are there new ones we want to consider? And to the earlier point that Dana made, we have an OBAG cycle coming up that we want to prepare for. So next slide. The OBAG funding schedule is such that we need to present to them a scope of what we would like to do with education encouragement by early part of 2026. Somewhat extended process. We will get obligated the funds, and then we will go out to it with an RFP in the summer of 2027 so that we can bring a contractor on board and be ready for the fall of 2027. We've been doing great work so far. Next slide. We also would, these are many of the activities that Christina just shared with you. Next slide, please. We'd like to refine that. Again, I think focus more time in building that network of partners that we have, including, as I mentioned before, superintendents, electeds, bolstering working groups within each city, which has been highly successful in Santa Rosa and Petaluma, but there's opportunity to do that in some of the smaller towns, but we want the endorsement of the leadership in those areas. Secondly, we want to continue making sure that as we're collecting the safety assessment information, it's not sitting on a shelf or a website, but it's getting rolled into infrastructure planning. Next slide, please. We'd like to continue to even bolster bigger numbers in the countywide walk and roll to school day And lastly, in the spirit of really seeing the metric shift towards those numbers of students that can in fact walk and bicycle, there has been a lot of good and continue to be good work in walk and roll buses. They tend to be either weekly, maybe monthly. We are looking at a program, we are trying to truly institutionalize this at 2 pilot schools so that we can see a significant change between the beginning and the end of the school year. And that will take some financial funding to really structure that program. Next slide. These are sort of the details of the steps that will get us to institutionalizing that. And last slide. We welcome any comments of other programs that you might like, but perhaps more importantly, next slide. We also are sharing that with the good work that is happening with the infrastructure project, we have found that we are needing a deeper commitment with our contractor, Mark Thomas, to really ensure that we are developing those engineering plans as robustly as possible. So we are asking for you to receive this presentation and provide authorization for our executive director to negotiate a contract amendment with Mark Thomas. It's my first time asking, did I ask that correctly? Executive director? Okay, just checking. So with that, I know that we tried to move as quickly as possible, but opening the conversation for questions for Christina and or myself. Yes.
All right, with that, first I actually want to go to public comment on item 5.2 and see if there's anyone in person who wishes to speak on that item. Seeing none, is there anyone online?
There's not.
And let's go to 5.3. Is there anyone in person who wishes to comment on that item? Seeing none, anyone online?
There's no online comments.
All right, and with that, I will bring it back for questions and comments. And before I open it up, I just want to say this is so inspiring and exciting. And I think it was really great to actually have sort of the 1-2 together. So thank you very much for your flexibility. Vice Chair Kelly.
Thank you. I don't think my mic is working. I'm getting the flashing beacon of death. Question for you about how, I mean, I know you just mentioned this, but how these plans don't just kind of exist on a shelf or in isolation, and what we can be doing to better incorporate the outcomes into whether it's priority projects or the scoring criteria that we use to identify. Maybe this is a question for Director Cameron. When we're looking at funding projects that are going to really move the needle on the outcomes that are being highlighted in these plans, how do we address that through, say, the funding cycle that we're in, you know, or future funding cycles, so that we're actually implementing projects that are going to improve outcomes?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So none of our plans we want to sit on the shelf, and acknowledge that sometimes they can do that. So with regard to this plan, you know, it's going to take the work that we've done and, you know, prioritize those schools and sign specific treatments that can be done. Any projects within that vicinity, ideally, we would have these scopes added to existing projects that overlap. These projects will also be teed up for any future funding call for projects that happen with regard to the next SCTCA call for projects, as well as any grant funds between now and then.
I can also build off that, just in adding that with each of the jurisdictions, one of the things that we're doing as we start the planning around the school zones is we are making sure that we are downloading all the adopted plans. So we're understanding where ATPs have been adopted in each of the jurisdictions and laying those lines on the maps, because we feel that designing and implementing safe routes, the SRTS routes, is also a way to build out the ATP. So for example, so many of the corridors that have floated up to connect multiple schools are also ones that are in their ATP. And so the city of Healdsburg is saying, yes, this is an ATP route, and we had hoped in the future to be able to build it out. And we're like, great, Safe Routes to School is sort of the Trojan horse for being able to build out your ATP. So we'll look at, we're checking out ATP Cycle 8 now as well. We have a funding tool that we're getting more familiar with called HireGov, which I've been asked to get much more proficient in. So the hope is that we're identifying those funding sources that perhaps we're not familiar with, and as much as possible, thinking about some of the climate mitigation. So shade trees and maybe water capture in addition to the mobility improvements.
Great. Director Giudice?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the presentation. So taking a look at the criteria and the scoring of how you evaluated all these bundled areas. In Roanoke Park, you picked Southwest Boulevard bundle, A and B sections, very high density, some social justice issues in that area as well. Contrasting that with Snyder Lane, where the majority of our students go to school, either at Lawrence Jones or at the ranch, well over 1,000 kids in each one of those schools.
Okay.
Did community amenities play into any of this? In other words, equidistance between those two schools is not only a very large park, but the community center, the sports center, and Spreckles Center. So there are a lot of kids going from both those schools right to that amenity. There are after-school programs. There's any number of things going on there. So I'm just curious as to, what the mix looked like.
We did not include community amenities. I think part of it, we were trying to, as Angelica called out before, we wanted to ensure that we develop an algorithm that is replicable, knowing that we're making a good dent in the number of schools that we could impact during this grant period. We wanted to, at the end of it, be able to refresh the data easily and revisit the ranking. Doesn't necessarily answer your question, but the community assets probably felt more qualitative than quantitative. But I'm happy to revisit the conversation with our partner, Edie, in Roanoke Park and see, I'm happy to raise those. And what we want to be flexible. So in other words, similar to Santa Rosa and Petaluma, who have done so much work in Safe Routes to School, we wanted to ensure that we're using this grant, even though certain schools bubble to the top. Please don't have us focus on those if that's redundant or in conflict with other projects that are underway. So happy to revisit that with Edie if you would like.
Thanks. Yes, and I formed an education committee in Roanoke Park with Councilmember Rodriguez, who actually takes the lead. So maybe engaging with that committee as well, and the superintendent Mayte to get her input would be very important.
Absolutely. And I think I should preface that we would like to engage with the city staff, make sure we're comfortable with those bundles. And then the goal is, again, through this sort of expanded project, building awareness at all the superintendent levels. This is the direction we're heading. Do we have your support and do we have your endorsement? Because if we have not touched those schools through the good work of Christina, let's start at the highest level, get their endorsement and partner with them so they can open the doors at the school. And we're coming to them as you're supported by your district. This is an important work. We're not just knocking as a cold partner on the outside. Sure.
Great. Director Corsi.
Thanks. On the chart where you talk about the priority planning for infrastructure, I believe it is, where you have the bundles. I understand that not every school is on there because not every school fit into different bundles, but the two highest ranked schools are not on there at all. And then just out of curiosity, where are number 1 and number 2?
I knew I was gonna, I don't have the answer at the moment because I can't remember. I don't have the raw list in front of me, but there was a reason why 1 and 2 were not there. Thank you. It's closed.
No, I don't remember the list because I only saw it in the presentation, but I know Kid Street Charter was listed as the number 1 school, and that school may close. I mean, that school is a little iffy in terms of its continuation. So I think that may have been just like, let's hold off on schools that may close. I don't know about number 2 though.
I'll look up number 2.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions, comments from my colleagues? Full disclosure, my husband volunteers for Safe Routes to School and loves kind of the monthly activities at my kids' schools and leads, bike trains. And it's really, really wonderful. A couple of questions in terms of next steps. Is there anything that we could do to expand our reach further? I totally support the prioritization and trying to get kind of the biggest bang for our buck in terms of schools. And yet I also know that actually even sometimes, especially in West County where you don't have as many sort of youth living in a sort of area, it becomes kind of more dangerous to utilize rural roads because people are just not expecting kids to be there. And so, and also just thinking about like, funding that we might have, say, through the county when we're doing like a pavement preservation program, and is there an opportunity to, like low hanging fruit, like stripe in a bike lane or something? How can we go about, in future rounds trying to move beyond the top tier list and, kind of get to more of those, 100 schools or whatever that were ranked?
Couple of thoughts. I would say for the purposes of, and hopefully I'm answering your question. So for the 12 IIPs or infrastructure projects that will come out of this grant period, we are developing basically an Excel-oriented database where we will be capturing all of the proposed improvements across all the schools. And I think that tool will be helpful so that if the city, for example, would like to do something programmatically on crosswalks, and there are a whole series of crosswalks recommended, those are things that they can address in the near term. Your question is specifically beyond the schools that we're touching through this current grant process, is that correct?
Yeah.
The hope would be that we are establishing strong Safe Routes to School task force in these other jurisdictions as a part of this grant project. And we are sharing with them the processes to capture the data and have their city staff be fully participating in those task force, so that to date, where the challenge has been is because the city staff, for reasons that are probably valid, have not been able to participate in the site assessments. There's been a gap from that information getting from school community to the city staff. We're hoping to sort of institutionalize that, so as they perhaps develop programmatic things like striping or signage, they can start with that. But we're also doing a better job of spotlighting and raising up those concerns so that they can find a project or funding place to go.
Great. And so Christine, is that kind of, I know that we've done that like for Oak Grove and Willowside out in West County, where we bring, someone from our team, we meet with someone from Safe Routes to School, and then we bring someone from public infrastructure to talk about, are there easy things we could do? Like put up no parking so that there's actually space for the kids to walk and bike. So is that kind of, that would be that process?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to clarify that when we did the audits in Santa Rosa and Petaluma, we did have Public Works planning reps at all of those audits, and we worked with them to identify what those issues are. And I think so that would be absolutely the process, and it's really important. You can do an audit without having city staff there, but I don't think it's very useful. I think you really need to bring those parties together. I think it's great that the work that Margot is doing is actually going a step further and actually developing, plans that the cities can more easily plug into a grant application. I may not be saying that right, but I think like what we're doing is we're like, this crosswalk needs the light timing needs to be changed, or this bike lane, the crosswalk needs to be shortened. So we'll have all this list that comes out of an audit, and we actually share that with the city. And with Santa Rosa, we had a spreadsheet that each improvement, each identified opportunity was listed, and we share that info, and they go into it and say, oh, we've done this. So that line of communication between us, the schools, and the city is ongoing. And I think that is really critical to making sure that the projects happen.
Great. One other question that I have is that I know in West County, some schools are used heavily for sports on the weekends because it's like the only school in the community that has functional soccer fields, for instance. And so that's where all the tournaments are. is there anything kind of looking at that recreational use or, because then there's a lot of kids, right, who are using that beyond the school even to try to access that, or just looking at community parks? Because I love the fact that we are focusing on and prioritizing school. I recognize that a lot of schools actually serve as parks in their community on the weekends. And then also that we have park areas that are heavily used, not only by children, but also by seniors in our community, a lot of folks with, trying to walk their dog, et cetera.
So what I might suggest particularly is as we begin this site assessment process with those schools is that we do a better job up front in the conversation that we have with both the superintendent and the school principal is to have a set of screener questions that we can go deeper on than the ones we already have. How else is the school used? Is there a joint use process in place? Is it used as a recreational outlet in the non-school hours? Are there, and we do ask these questions already, but are there parks or recreational areas close by or adjacent to the school campus that we need to be aware of so that when we are doing site assessment, we're thinking about the connectivity between the school, sort of to your earlier point, between the school campus and another open or recreational space? Because we don't want to lose sight of that. And if the answer is yes, then we will work more aggressively to say, are there participants or people that attend the rec center who could also participate in the site assessment and help inform that infrastructure planning process?
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments from my colleagues, Director Rabbit?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it. I can tell you just anecdotally, I know every morning there's a group of about 10, they're all young boys, men, either going to the high school or junior high, meeting by my house on their bikes to ride over. So there does, and my wife actually, we talked about this weekend. There seems to be a little more freedom, at least in Petaluma, for youth on bikes out and about, and that's a good thing. Maybe something to do with the works that has been going on to make the roads safer. I was wondering, in the mornings I drive by the SMART station in Petaluma again, and it's like school drop off. And if there's anything with first and last mile dealing with those kids, rather than just having their parents drive now instead of to the school, but to the train station or vice versa from the other end. Because I think there's a considerable amount of folks, it seems to me, with all the school shifting, there's been a lot of families going into different jurisdictions and different school districts, enrollments and whatnot. And then again, I share the same issues within the true safe routes to school in terms of the infrastructure, which we used to, I think, spend the majority of the dollars on in the old days. I think Pengrove, for instance, it's a charter school. It's very attractive. It means it's AM, PM peak is just full of cars in drop off and very difficult to do anything to circumnavigate that. And, Pengrove's specific plan prohibits sidewalks because they want to have that rural character. So at the same time, those kind of things, looking forward to seeing what we can do to kind of branch out from those. And then what's the overall perspective? The site assessment is really taking account into the liability issues that were highlighted some years back regarding schools participating or not?
We are, for the schools that we have identified through this grant process, we will, with the exception of Santa Rosa and Petaluma, because we've had such active participation or we've had such a high level of site assessments already completed in the near term, we'll be pretty quickly getting to developing concept plans that we will be taking back to the Santa Rosa and Petaluma schools. For the other jurisdictions where we have not had a lot of interaction, we will be hosting a site assessment with our contractor engineers with us so that they're getting the feel of on the ground, and then we will transition into the concept plans that we will bring back to the school communities. So there are a whole series of site assessments that will be happening between now and the time that we create the infrastructure plans in spring of 2027. And also with regard to Lakeville, if you're mentioning the SMART station, task 3, of this Vision Zero action planning project is the Lakeville multimodal corridor improvement study. So we're looking at creative ways of addressing the multi-mobility around that.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we do have an action item for item 5.3. Yes. So, and that is the amendment to the task order.
I move to advance staff's recommendation for the amendment to the task order.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Seeing none, that does carry unanimously. And thank you so much, not only for the presentation, but for all of your work on this. I think you can tell that it's something that we all care about. And I heard that you had very lively committee presentations as well. So thank you so much, Christine and Margot. Really, really appreciate it. So with that, we are going to go ahead and move on to 5.4, which is our Comprehensive Transportation Plan Performance Assessment Report. And I believe it's Adam who's going to present that.
All right. Hello, Madam Chair and board members. My name is Adam Garcia, data analyst for SCTCA. I'm excited to bring you a presentation today on the overview of our performance of our model, our travel model. We use our travel model, as you know, to be able to evaluate projects, both big and small, for related to transportation, housing, large plans. And so this is an ongoing effort to make sure that the model is up to date. So for our model, we're looking at two main different variables to be able to evaluate the performance. One is based off MTC's 2050 land use projections, which we'll go over in a second. And the other one is the Comprehensive Transportation Plan projects. So the great list of projects that have come forward. So just to give a quick little overview of where we're looking at for our potential growth based off Plan Bay Area 2050 plus, we're looking about a 25,000 new households in Sonoma County, and then about 53,000 new jobs. So that's about 13% growth in households, and then 24% in employment. So to take a quick step back, this is looking at our Comprehensive Transportation Plan vision and goals. As you may know, that this CTP is just a light update, so we're primarily just updating the CTP project list. The visions and the goals are remaining the same for this CTP, but for the next one, we'll be digging into these goals, vision, and more of the details to do a more full reevaluation. But for right now, these are the different performance measures that we have to evaluate our scenarios in the travel model. So you can reference that list. We're going to go over them in a little depth right now. But before we do, just to mention, to reemphasize, this is really a high-level analysis. So this is looking at just a few of not a deep dive necessarily into the CTP performance, but trying to just highlight a few of the main points. We know that the future is uncertain. On one hand, 2050 plus shows us continued housing and job growth, even though despite there's been a recent slowdown in population in Sonoma County. Another perspective would be the California Department of Finance, which projects future growth based off the recent years' growth patterns. So in our case, this would be a no growth scenario because that's largely what Sonoma County has been doing in terms of population. Next, the CTP projects are financially unconstrained with funding available from Go Sonoma and other sources. The next point is that largely our towns are mostly built out. There are a few limited infill opportunities, so to be able to change the overall land use patterns is very limited. So we can do the best with what we have. And then let's see, lastly, just to make note that this travel model is based off a trip-based model, which does have some limitations. In the future, we'll be looking at an activity-based travel model that will be able to have more depth in terms of particularly walking, biking, and other modes. So here's a quick look at our 4 different scenarios. So the first one is, what did the world look like in 2023 in terms of land use, our transit network, roadways. The second scenario was based off the California Department of Finance. That's a no growth scenario, but with those CTP projects implemented. The third scenario combines both the housing and job growth with the CTP projects. And then the last scenario shows just the growth without the CTP projects. So looking at the system condition, checking out our pavement condition index, there is a slight increase from a score of 53 to 57, so there is some progress being made countywide. There is a tool that's available for cities to use that's called Street Saver, I believe, that can be utilized for more detailed types of analysis. Let's see. Looking at transit connectivity, one of the great points is from the CTP projects is increased bus frequency. So we're looking at least 200 hours of additional bus vehicle revenue hours. The SMART to Cloverdale will increase the number of transit vehicle revenue hours even more. We'll have more updates on what that total increase will be in the final CTP, but that would significantly add to our number of transit vehicles on the road and rail. Shifting attention to our collisions and crashes, when we look at just VMT to make an estimate of our collision rate, we see that there is an increase overall with the population increase and job increase. But however, when looking at crash data from our Vision Zero dashboard, which comes directly from jurisdictions, we see actually an increase from or decrease from about 6 collisions countywide per day down to about 4 collisions per day. So some good progress there on reducing the number of collisions. When we look at our travel efficiency, the main method that we use is hours of delay. One of the notable points here is that with a lot of our growth from jobs and housing in the 2050 no CTP project scenario, our delay would increase up to nearly 4 hours per person per month. However, when we look at the 2050 scenario with the CTP projects, that roughly tracks consistent with population growth, so not a huge increase in delay. For our transit use and active transportation, we're looking at our mode share for both trips to work as well as for all trips. For trips to work on our left, we can see probably for no big surprise, the increase in work from home has decreased a little bit from some of the other modes that we get to work. And when we look at the mode share for all trips, we see there is that increase in transit usage. One of the other great highlights from a lot of our work, as was mentioned previously from the Safe Routes to School presentation, was the expansion of bicycle facility routes through the ATP. It's nearly tripling the amount of all different bike pathways, bike lanes, bike routes across the county. This will increase even more once we get the final tallies from the jurisdictions that weren't part of the SCTCA ATP grant. That's Santa Rosa, Windsor, and Petaluma. So that will increase ever more. For transit ridership, we see another great highlight, an increase in about 8,600 new riders for the 2050 CTP project. That's about a 65% increase in transit ridership. Looking at equity in the environment in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, this is another highlight, something to be proud of. A lot of our vehicle emissions are declining as we transition our personal fleets over to more efficient modes with better efficiency in their engines to reduce overall emissions. That's largely from statewide requirements. The vehicle miles traveled shows a similar story to the delay that we expect from these different scenarios without those CTP projects, but with the population and job growth, there's quite an increase in VMT. However, when we do implement those CTP projects with the housing and job growth, that VMT and VMT per capita, well, the overall VMT should say increases roughly proportional to population growth, whereas VMT per capita pretty much stays the same. So that's a great credit to the CTP projects. And then our last few slides, we're looking at the vehicle miles traveled per capita. This is based off the travel model. So we can see the amount for how much people are traveling. That's for usually just half the trip based off the origin of the destination. There is some anomaly with the city of Sonoma. As you can see, we're looking into that data, but will likely be resolved through some further analysis for the final report. And then shifting our attention to the unincorporated area, we see, as you might expect, larger VMT per capita in most areas, primarily due to the greater distance needed to drive to get to those local needs and services. The Russian River here stands out as notably having lower VMT per capita, potentially due to the greater access to local goods and services in that area. So just to bring a quick overview of the main findings, some of the highlights are the improved transit ridership and coverage through the CTP projects, our expectation for congestion to mostly about stay consistent across the different scenarios with the CTP improvements, and thirdly, the expanded bicycle and pedestrian system, as a lot of those projects, a lot of great, hopefully quick, easy striping projects can expand the bicycle network across the county. And then lastly, our projection for decreasing overall emissions as the vehicle fuel economy improves. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Thank you very much. And first, I will see if there are any members of the public who wish to comment on this item. Seeing none, is there anyone online who wishes to comment on this item?
There are no online comments.
With that, I will bring it back to the board for any questions, comments. Director Corsi?
Just a quick question on the improved transit connectivity and usage. Is mascots factored into that, or are we waiting until that's done to be?
Yeah, the bus service for mascots is included in that analysis. Mascots is projecting, I believe, SMART to go up to Cloverdale. That's what a little more calculations are needed to finalize that, but that would be significantly more in terms of like thousands of vehicle revenue hours that would be added.
That is included in the 2050.
The SMART to Cloverdale is included in, yeah, the mascots 2050 scenario.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, thank you so much for the report. Really appreciate the update and all the work that went into it. With that, we're going to move on to our RCPA item, the Equitable Building Electrification Action Plan, and that is going to be BC.
Very good. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is BC Capps. I'm the Climate Programs Manager here with SCTCA. I'm here today to seek approval of our final version of our Equitable Building Electrification Action Plan, a report that we've been working on for the last few months. I will also discuss our proposed steps for implementation and outline our intended partnership model for moving this work forward over the next few months. As you may remember, I presented in depth at our last board meeting on greenhouse gas emissions from the built environment and on the overall building stock across Sonoma County. To summarize very briefly, over 23% of our countywide emissions are attributable to the energy used within our buildings for space heating, water heating, and cooking food. And of this amount, over 77% comes from the burning of natural gas in furnaces, water heaters, and gas ranges. These emissions result from activities across 229,000 structures, of which over 90%, or approximately 210,000 buildings, are classified as residential across the county. Thus, the underlying focus of this Equitable Building Electrification Action Plan is on reducing or eliminating natural gas use in our residential buildings countywide. To accomplish this task, building systems and household appliances will need to be evaluated and potentially upgraded to reduce or eliminate carbon emissions. These proposed improvements include the installation of heat pump furnaces, heat pump water heaters, and electric induction stoves, among other things. To power this equipment, solar PV systems with integrated battery backup can also be installed to allow the building owner to produce and manage their own energy. Additionally, electric vehicles with a vehicle-to-home charging can also be used as an additional emergency backup power during power outages. Finally, this time is also a great opportunity to make energy efficiency upgrades to the home and install home hardening measures in conjunction with completing the work listed on this slide. Throughout the process of developing this action plan, SCTCA staff gathered input from this board, from our climate action advisory committee, from our climate change members and partners, from a specially formed jurisdictional staff advisory group, and from multiple feedback sessions with social equity and health advocates, as well as from a selection of trained energy professionals to help develop and hone the report's recommendations. This guidance was sorted and filtered into 5 priority areas that are listed on this slide, and a strategic vision statement was developed for each area to illustrate the desired end results of this work. These 5 areas were then used as a framework to developing the specific recommendation actions contained within this report, and for the subset of near-term implementation actions that are slated to start this year, which are focused on our core organizational strengths of planning, partnerships, and funding. Let's walk through each of these 5 areas briefly. First off, the building electrification policy, let me restart that. The first building electrification priority area is local policy support, with a near-term focus on legislative and policy efforts and long-term program funding. Much of this initial work will be centered on implementation of the Bay Area Air District's building appliance rules for furnaces and water heaters. These requirements to install zero-emission alternatives go into effect in 2027 for water heaters and 2029 for furnaces. There's much work to be done across local jurisdictions and in partnerships with local contractors to prepare for these rule changes. Additionally, work to establish long-term funding sources for local climate action will continue on through our existing climate strategy ad hoc. To complement this work, multi-jurisdictional climate grant planning and coordination meetings are being held to identify collaborative project proposals and potential funding options. We're working closely with staff from the County of Sonoma and with the City of Petaluma to host a collaborative grant planning meeting here at our offices on October 1st, and jurisdictional staff across all of the county has been invited to participate. Our second major priority area is on community education and the need to inform local residents and building owners about the benefits of electrification. Near-term actions here include the creation of an outreach-focused working group to identify priority efforts, develop integrated educational campaign materials, and coordinate community engagement efforts across organizations. Our third priority areas focus specifically on energy equity for low-income households and for equity priority communities. Near-term priorities within this area include seeking new collaborations with social equity and health-focused organizations to broaden our reach and to further integrate the topics of climate, health, and equity. Additionally, there is a need for the creation of culturally inclusive educational resources and the translation of existing materials for broader distribution across the whole community. The fourth major area, priority area, is working with our local contractor workforce to expand educational and training resources on decarbonization and electrification technologies. SCTA's near-term role here will be a little bit different given that active coordination of the building contractor workforce is not within one of our current core strengths. Instead, we are proposing to work with local partners to identify the lead organizations that are best suited to support local contractors and to expand these training opportunities. There are several leading organizations in this arena already active across the county, and our hope is to be a trusted partner on this effort, not the designated lead. The final of our 5 priority areas is focused on the actual building upgrades themselves that are needed to reduce countywide carbon emissions. To this end, multiple incentive and assistant programs already exist and will form the basis of our near-term efforts. Programs from the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, from Sonoma Clean Power, and from Healdsburg Electric Utility all offer financial incentives and other services for local property owners. Through existing program funding, we will continue to support and promote these programs while also looking for additional areas of alignment. Our final near-term action of this area will be to identify and evaluate potential project ideas and program proposals that could be implemented with additional long-term funding. This is noted as Action 20 on this chart. Some of the initial ideas that we have been discussing and that we'll give further thought to would be completing a countywide building stock and energy use analysis, establishing a building benchmarking and performance standards requirements, or things like creating a turnkey residential installation program with a specific low-income direct install option for low-income households. While there's no shortage of great ideas like these, this final effort will evaluate, prioritize, and identify funding for future implementation of these ideas. And thus, it's really tied in with our funding and working group that we have, I mentioned we'll be meeting next month. To conclude today, this table here summarizes the initial focus areas that have been identified for the near-term implementation. These are all taken from the full report, which is 64 pages long, which is included in the board packet that lists all 20 of our recommended actions, as well as a wealth of additional background materials that were presented at the last meeting. With that, I respectfully ask for your approval of the Equitable Building Electrification Action Plan. I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you may have, and thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll go ahead and ask if there are any members of the public in person who wish to comment on item 5.5. Seeing none, is there anyone online who wishes to comment on this item?
There are no online comments.
Seeing none, I will go ahead and bring it back to the board for any questions or comments. Director Harvey?
You talked about the low income equity and the need for really to be the solar and that backup. What about a lot of folks are more middle income and it's quite an expensive proposition to really be self-sufficient? We also have plenty of seniors in Sonoma County. So how is that going to work?
So the total cost of these upgrades, no matter what one income level, is going to be a tremendous effort. And I do believe that although a number of the programs are specifically focused on and tailored towards low income, numerous programs, and I'm thinking within the Bay Area Regional Energy Network, are really expanding and in which there's additional services for low income and equity priority kind of households, but then the services are really then that there is a middle income tier, and that's a lot of what the marketing and the promotion is really focused on, is at the core level, the base programs are really designed to assist as much as possible lower income, but they're really designed from a programmatic and organizational viewpoint to really pull in kind of that middle income tier. And specifically, if I can turn to my colleague, Anna, really quick, is that correct with on one of which of the Bay Room programs? Okay, so, and that's really the way that the single family residential program is really aimed for these days, so. Sure.
Other questions? Director Lands?
Thank you, Chair. I brought that same questions that Director Harvey had about the cost last time and how it's cost prohibitive. We were talking a 6-figure difference. As a contractor, I know recently we've done different water heater swaps. A current water heater replacing like for like is about $2,000. We recently did one with an upgrade to an electric, and it was $17,000. The median income people are going to get hit really, really hard with this. Is it cart before the horse to not have the options and make it financially possible to do this and make it to where they have to do it?
I think
I couldn't afford to do this that you're doing here.
So as somebody who's in a similar, just at a personal level, as somebody who's also attempting to upgrade my house, I'm very familiar with these financial issues and figuring out how to balance this. The long-term, this report as it stands was not able to crack that nut to figure out how all of this will be paid for affordably over the long term. And I will need to kind of admit that upfront, or kind of acknowledge that upfront, that that's something that there is going to be a high price tag on a lot of this work. A lot of the funding is going to need to come from individual homeowners. It will be a heavy lift for some. And where that additional marginal difference comes from, I have to admit, I actually don't have a very solid answer for, other than one of the things we really want to do is kind of looking at these, really trying to work. Obviously, we already work very closely with Sonoma Clean Power, already work very closely with Healdsburg Electric and some of these other programs. But I do think that there's an area here of where we could, and also, I guess I also wanted to mention working very closely with the county's Energy and Sustainability Division, that I think the part of the longer term solution is analyzing the house, analyzing the structure, determining what needs to be done, coming up with that long-term roadmap, acknowledging that those improvements are not something that's going to be made all overnight, all in one, and then strategizing on what are those items that are most feasible to do with incentives or with other financial help as those incentive programs become available.
Okay.
And so my hope is that we can kind of get some synergies by working between our partner organizations to really try to be able to present kind of a nice roadmap for homeowners to follow.
You also mentioned a lot of the groups you're working with. You had talked about working with different advocates for contractors. Have you reached out to North Coast Builders Exchange, IBEW, people like that? Even PG&E at this point is saying that this isn't possible with the grids that they have. And so that's why I'm hoping you can add them into the conversation a little bit sooner, so that they can actually have the people that are the nuts and bolts of this can take the ideals and make it actually work. And you know, I'm on your side. I completely agree that this is where the direction we need to go. I'm just hoping that we can do it and do it in a good way and make it, when we put it out there to people, that they can afford it, accept it, and promote it and push it and make it happen.
Two quick responses. One, when you mentioned PG&E and thinking about the grid capability, grid capacity, that is something that is kind of outside of, it's above and beyond kind of our control. So that's something that we will look to work through state efforts to kind of influence, but we don't necessarily have control over. But when it comes to working with the contractor network, I have conversations with North Coast Builders Exchange and those other groups have kind of just started. But I do think it's a wonderful opportunity, and maybe it's something I would love to follow up with you after this meeting, and maybe get some of your specific advice on kind of who some of the key individuals, not just the groups, but key individuals to really bring into that conversation. Because I do think that there's a need to both make it work from the homeowner, from a property owner's point of view and make it affordable, but there's the flip side that if it's not that it needs to work for the contracting workforce as well from a profit motive, financial perspective to really kind of bring both halves of those equations together. And certainly from kind of my perspective and my experience, I'm much more on that programmatic side of knowing the residential, how to do it. But I could actually really use some, it'd be a very good conversation if I could follow up with you on kind of the contractor side. That'd be helpful.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Before going to questions, one other thing that I want to mention is that we are at the Bay Area Air District, working on essentially coming back to the board with how do we create exceptions for high cost situations? Because while we want folks for whom it is actually cost competitive to electrify, especially with water heaters, which are also sort of cost effective in terms of ongoing electricity costs, we recognize that there will be situations where someone needs an electrical panel upgrade or where someone is actually in a neighborhood where other folks have electrified. And so to electrify one more home would actually require a larger sort of neighborhood level upgrade to be able to bring more power there. So there still is a lot of unknown, but I want to kind of recognize the cost concerns and know that that's something that the Air District will be considering. Director Rabbit, and then it was Director Harvey.
Yeah, just kind of piggyback on, as an architect and someone who still dabbles and keeps my hand in building. I mean, just because the products are available does not make them, and they're expensive, it also does not make them feasible even for the homeowner. And that's coming from folks, for instance, electric gas, tankless gas water heaters just don't work compared to a gas tankless. They haven't gotten it there yet. It's not unlike what we hear at the bridge regarding electric buses can't make it up the Waldo grade yet. But it's great that we're pushing the boundaries and keep everyone going. I just don't want us to be out too far ahead of our skis, basically putting everyone in a bad spot to make a bad decision. And it's not just the contractors, it's the homeowners who are going to end up with the appliances long term. And I do hope that, there are exceptions, but even more so at this stage, even incentives and or really sitting down and figuring out what works, what doesn't, and where we can make the biggest bang for the buck. At the end of the day, new construction in this county especially is going to be infinitesimal compared to the existing homes and buildings that are out there.
Director Harvey.
Oh, there you go. So along those lines, about getting our skis out ahead of ourselves, there's a lot that still needs to be done, but I want to be sure that we're not putting in policies earlier than we can really realize things, because the worst thing we can do is dictate things to people that they can't really accomplish. So I'm a little bit leery of the timing of, insisting that everybody in the county do something that they may or may not be able to afford, or the technology may or may not be exactly where we need it to be. So there's got to be a balance there when it comes to policies.
Director Krepke.
Just to dovetail some more, I'm wondering if instead of getting to electrification, taking it from an approach of getting away from reliance on natural gas, could be used to create some sort of a ladder. So I'm not a contractor or an architect, but my understanding is that in Sonoma County, roughly 75% of the housing was built before 1980, before there was any energy efficiency requirements of any kind. Can we explore things that are more financially feasible for a larger group of people, such as better weather stripping, insulation, so that if they do have gas heaters and stuff like that, they won't use them as much? Because that as a stepping stones for those that can't afford the $17,000 or whatever it might be.
Yes, and I think part of it may be the way I've presented this is I think I'm jumping in with our marquee headline of the changing over of appliances. Underneath that, but unstated for me here today, is this work that really has to do with the base of energy efficiency, weather sealing, and insulation around the house as a first step, as a precursor. And I think that's something that I mentioned it here in the report as it's a very nice time when one is doing these building upgrades to do that work. But absolutely, I completely agree that a lot of the work that needs to be done up front that can actually make immediate impacts to one's living situation is some of those more simpler, cost-effective methods. It also then allows that opening of a conversation with the homeowner as a way to basically then begin to build that kind of longer-term plan. Which I mentioned in response to Director Lands, of kind of thinking about maybe starting with the energy efficiency pieces that are non-appliance related, and then to build from there.
So coming from my profession in sales, it's always easier to upsell than to start at the top and then have someone say no and walk away from everything. So that's what I would suggest, is to start easy and palatable and then go from there.
Very good.
Other questions, comments? Yeah, Director Kater Thompson.
We just got it true it for the first time. And so, I'm trying to figure out how our solar is actually working. And, and really to upgrade was gonna cost me $18,000. And yet I just put a system in 5 years ago, and the system's fine. It's just, I have to look at charging an electric car, maybe not at home. And there's other means, but the costs are high. And so whenever I'm hearing talking about low income people, I don't know how people are going to afford this, but, and when I hear about weather stripping, I feel like, in the 70s, I was talking about weather stripping, and it's almost to the point of you really need to do more because the cost of energy is, continually going up, but I'm more concerned about the cost and who's really gonna get the benefit from it. And it seemed as though, the houses, in Sonoma County, they are, from the 70s and the 80s, a lot of these homes. And if you're a homeowner, you're gonna upgrade, but if you're renting, you're not necessarily gonna do that. And so renters are being hit the hardest. There's no means that we can tell people that you have to improve your rentals. And just my comment is it's just very expensive. And I think sometimes we live in a bubble. And we're not looking at what other people's needs are. And I just think of my own kids who all do well. And yet the prices are just getting too high to go out to dinner. People are starting to realize the costs just continue going. And when you're talking about energy, that's a huge bill every month. So I don't have an answer, but I am concerned with the cost and who we're really going after, and is it achievable?
If I could add one quick comment, I think, obviously, very important conversation. I guess I wanted to point out this plan, in development of this plan and coming up with our 5 priority areas, we had developed a kind of strategic vision statement for each of those. That's looking out in the future of where we want to get to. I think that's a long-term vision, and obviously, given these concerns, that's not a vision where we're getting to next fiscal year or next a year from now. So a lot of this is a vision-oriented strategic look forward. The other thing, as far as this specific report that we're looking for approval of today, all of the recommendations that are in the report are recommendations for ourselves as staff and of our colleagues and our partners of how to move the conversation forward. There are not stated recommendations of thou, as a homeowner, thou shalt do this, thou shalt, or here's step 1. That it's really the recommendations that are in this are recommendations for ourselves and our partners and the jurisdictions on what are those key questions to take on next to kind of move the conversation forward. So I think that that's where we kind of tried to find a middle ground with this report of having a strategic vision that kind of leads to where we'd want to get to, but the recommendations that are in the report are really about, and what do we need to do the next? So.
James, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to put this plan in a little bit of context and thank all the directors for the great input that we have and the concerns around the plan. And just remind, everyone, this is a very aspirational plan, right? And so, what we do here, right? So we plan, prioritize, coordinate, fund, and implement projects and programs, right? And so at the very beginning, looking for that aspirational plan, that's what this is. If we want to jump to implementation, that EASE program that, I look back at Anna and just smile because that's what we're doing. And if you see that plan, it's really about going in for that free home assessment, right? And then that free home assessment leads to, programs that will be weather stripping and, added insulation to your home that will come with significant funding and resources to do that. And then there'll also be that upsell of these other options if that is financially viable to you, not a requirement. And then when it comes to that, equity or middle income ground that we're referring to, that program does look at 120% of area median income, right? So, a single single person or a household, 132,000 for two people living in Sonoma County. So it's reaching into that middle ground to catch as many as possible to be eligible for the program. So just some of the comments were going into that implementation piece, and we're still in the aspirational space. So thank you for that.
Director Lowe?
I don't know if this is worth doing anything. I think it's hard to, even though it's aspirational, I get that. I want to associate myself with all the other concerns that were raised, that to do this as a county on our own without having state matching or federal tax incentives or whatever is really asking a lot of a county to do something like that. I mean, the arguments that have happened at the state capitol regarding rooftop solar is an example of, here was a program that could get us partially to where we wanted to go. And the reluctance to continue to fund it was also there. So I think part of what we have to do here is to advocate that we can't, we're talking about the climate of the planet. We're not going to solve it in Sonoma County without having buy-in from at least the state in helping us with some of this funding, because it is too much to ask someone on their own. We passed a climate bond. Maybe this is part of it, maybe it's not. But also, as I said before, I worked on an electrification statewide initiative that was rejected, that was opposed by the current governor, and would have put in all kinds of electrification, supported by IBEW all over the state, would have put people to work. So it's really difficult when you see something like this and you don't have a complete, agreement from, whether it's Washington, Sacramento, whatever, on down as to how to assist us in making this palatable and fundable for individuals. You just can't put individual homeowners that are trying to get their kids through college and go out to dinner one night on the hook for this. It's just, it's not feasible. But I agree with the aspirational part, but I just think that asking us to do this on our own without the advocacy and the buy-in and the support, whether it's, tax incentives or some other kind of matching grants, that's a lot to ask of a county. Rant over. Thank you.
So a couple thoughts. One is that obviously the federal funding environment has changed, which is really unfortunate. The other thing is that when you look at GGRF, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, it was really rated for CAL FIRE and the train, leaving sort of very little left over, right? Not for your train, by the way, for the train in the Central Valley, right? And so it does feel like there's certainly a need for external funding sources. So, I do think that we can be visionary in where we want to go while also keeping our feet rooted in reality. And hopefully we can get some kind of change to the funding environment. Because I agree, with my colleagues, the vast majority of the housing stock in Sonoma County has already been built. I think someone said most of it in the 60s and 70s. I've always lived in homes from the 20s and 30s myself, but same thing applies. And I also really appreciate calling out just the need for energy efficiency. It's like, especially if you're looking at changing, say, from something that's powered by natural gas to, a heat pump, right, for your heating and cooling needs. You're going to spend a ton more money heating your home in the winter if you don't have things like dual pane windows, or, if you can even just get some heavy curtains, right? If you don't have that weather stripping, all of those things I think will really, really make a difference. And the other challenge I think that we face in California, quite frankly, is the uncontrolled cost of energy, which, is something that we're really working and laser focused on Sonoma Clean Power at trying to contain. But you look at our energy costs and they vastly exceed what we see in other states, or even, under PG&E, what we see with other munis around the state of California. So need to continue on the work and try to make sure that we're I think that one of the other challenges is the state tends to set these lofty goals that are like a few years out. And then we hit those few years and we're like, oh, maybe technology has not quite gone as quickly as we thought it would. And so I think we're kind of butting up against the limits of some of that feasibility right now. So with that, any other further comments, or is someone willing to make a motion on this item? Okay, go for it.
And I'll second it.
Great. So we have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Nay.
Okay, a nay from Director Lands. And I believe that everyone else is in support, no abstentions, no further opposition. All right, with that, the motion does carry. Thank you so much, BC. Appreciate it. And yeah, Director Keter Thompson.
I really do look into the future, even though I realize what's happening with the federal government and monies. But I think it's still important that we move this forward, because we have to look into the future. We can't keep going back to the weather stripping days. And so that's my comment.
Great. Anyone else going once, going twice? Director Amit?
Well, just to be clear, I'm voting, I voted in the affirmative based upon the comments that you made regarding this is a launching forward, not necessarily coming back to do anything draconian at this. So for me, this is really direction to staff. I'm not sure why it's an action item, but if the action item is the direction to staff, it's as you put it earlier.
Yeah, it's not a mandate, it's a vision and a goal that we would like to ultimately have more tools in our toolbox, right? To move forward with implementation, including funding, I think is the biggest gap that we're hearing from people. All right. And if you can solve for, the high cost of electricity through PG&E, that would be fantastic as well. So thanks for that. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Executive Director Cameron for the Executive Committee report.
Thank you, Chair. So at our executive committee, we did review our current agenda. We talked about the recent closure of the Water Upgrade Save program, and then discussed upcoming meetings and agendas. So with regard to upcoming meetings, we would like to do a brief poll of the directors that have their October schedule available. The October meeting is currently scheduled for October 13th. That is Indigenous Peoples Day. We have some directors that do have conflicts on that day. Looking at dates that could potentially work, the Monday before then, which would be the first Monday of October, which would be October 6th. If there was any directors that know now that they cannot make it, I'm seeing at least a hand and a head shake no. I'm seeing a couple. We are going to need a total of 8 directors available for that meeting. We have our final budgets that require the 8 affirmatives to finalize it. That's required at our October meeting.
Okay, can we do a thumbs up of who is available or believes to be available? For the 6th. For the 6th.
6th of October?
Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I see 8. I see 9. 9 gives us a 1-person buffer. Okay. We can maybe confirm this. And when we also actually have never mind. We've got Director Zolman and for Director Hinton. So
2:30,
Okay.
October 6th.
Great. Yes, that would be, yeah, we can get a calendar invite and we can also maybe potentially just confirm via email. Does that sound good? And then those who are not able to, if you could check with your alternate, that would be fantastic. All right. With executive committee at 1:30 and the board meeting at 2:30.
The board meeting will be at 2:30.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you very much. Back to you.
All right. Well, that concludes the report out from the executive committee.
Great, wonderful. Regional agency reports. Who wants to hit it off? Do we have any SMART, Golden Gate Bridge? Anyone want to throw anything out? Got anything going on?
Special meeting last week at Golden Gate Bridge, and of course, you know that our $864 million seismic retrofit is now 1.8 billion. So we decided we would phase it, evidently that didn't match up with the funding. So now we have two projects. And that's basically what we accomplished, and hopefully we met the deadline. I didn't get word from MTC. Did they approve this last Thursday, Wednesday?
I'm not there anymore, so I can't tell you.
Yeah, okay, that's right.
I'm sure they would.
I'm sure they did. So we are moving forward.
Sounds like super fun times. Anybody else have some updates? Director Corsi.
Just a quick. Two ribbon cuttings on the first weekend of October. The pathway segments from Cumberland to Pengrove on Saturday, and the pathway segments from North Park to Santa Rosa on Sunday.
Great. I did mention earlier, but update from the Bay Area Air District. We anticipate, and I'm not sure the timing on this, but at some point, the zero NOx appliance rules, which tie into exactly what we were talking about, will be coming back to the board of directors for some refinement, specifically to address cost concerns. So we've learned through our technical advisory committee that some types of units, there just actually isn't a replacement, or it would be cost prohibitive. So we're going to be bringing that back for revisions and essentially kind of exemptions for folks to be able to replace. Like with like is likely where it's going, although I'm not totally sure on that. I also wanted to mention California Air Resources Board on September, I believe it's 25th. Will be bringing back the Clean Fleets rule. And this will actually, it's September 25th, will actually sort of take away that rule because the waiver was revoked by the Trump administration and by Congress, so that there will no longer be kind of a zero EV fleet requirement for folks who are selling cars. However, and here's a really relevant part for local governments, the rule will still apply to any state or local government fleet. So if you have a water agency, if you have a, city, anything from a city bus to, city vehicles that are used by staff, all of that will actually have a 100% zero emissions vehicle requirement starting January 1st of 2027. And actually, even up until this point, you were supposed to have submitted 2 reports to the California Air Resources Board in April, sort of that would meet a 50% ZEV purchasing requirement. I did not vote for this originally, and I'm not even sure, honestly, if the County of Sonoma is in compliance. So I've been trying to figure that out. And just going back to affordability concerns and also just the limits of sort of technological feasibility, just wanted to make you all aware of that. So on September 25th, there would be a potential opportunity to hear from local jurisdictions if they feel that that is too aggressive of a timeline, especially in light of the fact that we are facing potentially draconian rollbacks in federal funding that we receive as local jurisdictions. So kind of bad timing and a little bit challenging. And we haven't really actually heard from the League of Cities or from CSAC. And so currently CARB staff thinks that there's no problem. So if you might want to reach out, if you are involved in any of those organizations and you have some concerns, you might want to go ahead and let them know about it. So with that, any other regional agency reports? Seeing none, I will go ahead and move on to, we've got the advisory committee agendas noted, SCTA, RCPA activities reports. I feel like we need to rebrand that. We haven't, though it's still on our agenda in the wrong way. SCTCA activities reports. I think we'll start with Ross with marketing and communication.
Noted on the branding. We'll make that happen. Good afternoon, directors. Here's some highlights from SCTCA communications and engagement work over the past 2 months. So related to that branding, there was an item today that you saw in the consent calendar. I've been working to secure a new website URL to host the updated SCTCA transportation and climate content. So thank you for approving that. We are submitting that to the ca.gov organization. They are rather specific about what is required. So hopefully we'll get that moving forward. Tabling related to the comprehensive transportation plan. We finished that up, tabling at the city of Sonoma and the Healdsburg farmers markets, completing the initial round of direct engagement for the plan. Tabling events happened at least once in each jurisdiction, with multiple happening in West County and Santa Rosa. Feedback was recorded, and the CTP survey was promoted. Nearly 700 full entries have been submitted to date in English and Spanish. The commute program, you may have seen in our newsletter, and then if you're signed up to the Sonoma Commutes, you would have seen this. This is called the Diamond Dozen, and this is something, a partnership with Transportation Authority of Marin, to create a new commute program that'll integrate with the existing Go Sonoma commute program. The Diamond Dozen campaign highlights the benefits of commuting, and it is timed with the new HOV lanes on the 101 to give some more options and improve support clean, safe travel. I will note as well, there's been a lot of communication related to those HOV lanes opening, and the current Caltrans information as of their website is that the new hours in Sonoma County are in effect today. That is 5 to 10 a.m. and 3 to 7 p.m. However, for the most updated information, I would go on the Caltrans site. This is up to them. We've had some difficulties managing the signage. Hopefully that's all going to get a lot smoother soon, we hope. But the Diamond Dozen program is related just in terms of giving more commute options. Lastly, I will say we sent out the notice for the save the date for the MSN B7 project completion. That is October 3rd at Olin Poly at 10 a.m. More details to follow. Please let me know if you have questions about these or any other engagement activities.
Great. Any questions? Director Abbott?
Hey, since you mentioned I believe you mentioned the HOV hours overall.
I did.
And I've gotten a lot of information, or a lot of people contacting me regarding that. And I remember, and James, I think we had this discussion when I was on MTC, and I didn't get to vote on this. If I did, I would have voted no, because I did not believe the shoulder hours, which are the first and last hour. It's a 3-hour window, but you add 2 for the shoulders. Not sure if I understand that concept, given the remote work, the changing commute patterns, and everything else post. Plus, to be honest, this section of freeway, whether the HOV lane was a CEQA mitigation, it was a CEQA mitigation that was determined to be one way 3 hours. And now it's, 10 or 9, I think it is, daily. So just throwing those pieces out there, because I think that I don't know what in the future, if there'll ever be I understand the debate over the HOV 3 or 2, but wasn't expecting the hours to go the way they did.
I will emphasize that it is a Caltrans decision in coordination with MTC and CHP. And then the only other thing I'd have to add to the comments you made was just to say that there was a real desire to see regional consistency. So these are the hours that other HOV lanes have within the Bay Area. It's not statewide consistency. Down in Southern California, they operate 24/7. But Bay Area, these hours are consistent for HOV lanes.
Yeah, and now with the sort of signs up on the side of the road, people I feel like are a little bit confused as to what to do going through Marin. The electronic, and then they say something different than the physical signs. Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you so much, Ross. And I think Chris is up next with climate change.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Cohn, Program Manager for Water Upgrade Save. I'll be giving the climate report for Tanya, who is on jury duty today. So first off, in planning.
Times, we're looking, I'm right next to juror number 7 here.
So for planning under the equitable EV charging plan, the staff has reviewed existing conditions report and provided feedback to the consultant. They've also shared information on the upcoming EV funding opportunities with the stakeholder advisory group on September 4th. Under projects, the GHG inventory, staff have worked to upgrade our online greenhouse gas inventory dashboard to include resilience indicator data for each greenhouse gas sector. They've also met with Zero Waste Sonoma staff to discuss GHG protocols for solid waste diversion and have worked with ICLEI to initiate an annual membership and gain access to ICLEI's ClearPath 2.0 software. For the BayREN programs, the single family program has now launched and has over 100 homeowner appointments booked through September in Sonoma County. These folks will receive free assessments and direct installs of measures such as insulation, duct sealing, and weatherization, as was previously discussed. Also, the program will be conducting a series of webinars, community events, and partnering with local jurisdictions. The BayREN Business Program is preparing for a relaunch in September, and the business program works with small businesses on various types of efficiency upgrades. BayREN also has a refrigerant replacement program, and that currently has 8 leads and 7 businesses qualified. And this program works to replace polluting refrigerants with environmentally friendly alternatives. Finally, the Codes and Standards program is hosting a forum on September 17th on resilient municipal facilities. And this will feature real-world case studies, a resource fair, and technical assistance opportunities. So it's a great opportunity for local staff to find out more about it. I believe BC mentioned this, but staff is also working to track the climate bond Proposition 4 funding to look for opportunities for grant programs, and they will be hosting a workshop on October 1st regarding coordination of various grant opportunities. And then finally, sorry, BayREN has decided to close the Water Upgrade Safe program. The main reason cited is that there were no new utility enrollments or customer projects since mid-2023. I want to note that in 2019, when we started, we were in the midst of the longest, driest mega drought in 1,200 years. And at the time, the state used large emergency reduction targets to address the drought. At that same time, the state initiated major changes to conservation policy that set annual water usage budgets, which they call objectives, for each water utility. To help the utilities meet the new objectives, the state provided grants for free direct install residential indoor upgrades for toilets, shower heads, and aerators. That is the same project scope as our program. So as a result, in 2023, utilities began to ask for help with outdoor conservation and customer side leak repair. And by mid-2024, the utility said their indoor residential need was saturated. So in the end, we could not pivot fast enough to meet the new utility priorities. So at this point, on Wednesday, there will be a webinar required by the CPUC to announce the closure to the public and CPUC service list members. Bayron will also file an advice letter in early October to seek permission to close the program by the end of the year. And there will be a final report, which I am happy to make available and also provide a presentation on if you wish at a future date. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And I think that we're all very sad to see that program go. I think it's kind of exactly what we were just having a conversation about, which is what are those low-cost solutions that can really make a huge difference in the lives of homeowners. So appreciate all of the staff work that has gone into this and the difference that has been made over the years.
Thank you.
Anyone
Any
have
other questions?
any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you so much. And I believe that a different Chris Barney is up next.
Good afternoon, Chair Hopkins and directors. I'll be giving our planning activities report for this afternoon. So I'll start out with vehicle miles traveled, our mitigation program. We do have the draft recommendations report out for comments. So presented on that, I believe 2 months ago. So we're collecting feedback on that from your local staff and the public. We held our second demonstration workshop last week to actually dig into how the program would actually work. So we presented a VMT exchange and the different steps. We had Fair and Peers walk through those steps. So we took a few different project examples, a housing project and a commercial project, and how that would interact with an exchange, looking at cost for VMT reduction and then a cost to the actual project sponsor. So we're working through some of that information, and we'll have some of that in the final report that we'll bring to you by the end of the year. So we had good attendance, a lot of local staff and housing experts, and all of those comments and discussions that we had at that workshop will be incorporated in the final report. So moving on to our community-based transportation plan project, we're wrapping up our phase 2 of outreach for that project and held a few community transportation resource fairs. So one in South Santa Rosa at Taylor Mountain Elementary School and one in Central Roanoke Park at John Reed Elementary School. So included the flyers for those in the report in your agenda packet and a picture from the Roanoke Park event in the packet. So at each of those fairs, we had transit providers, active transportation service providers, and support organizations. And we had a lot of members from the community show up, including families and kids, provide feedback on transportation improvements they'd like to see in those local communities. So really happy to get a lot of good feedback for those. We'll be using that feedback from those events and also from all the other outreach we've done to draft the final comprehensive transportation or community-based transportation plans that we'll be bringing to you later this fall for each of those areas. And the keystone of each of those reports will be a prioritized list of community transportation improvements. So really exciting to have those identified and to be able to start implementing some of those. So moving on to our comprehensive transportation plan, Ross mentioned wrapping up our CTP outreach. So that'll be a nice feature in our final CTP document, a summary of our outreach for that plan. Adam went through our performance assessment and how those CTP projects can help us move the needle in certain areas. And we're working on drafting the actual plan right now and have a draft plan later this year. So just a quick update on the regional transit-oriented communities policy. So MTC ABAG is actually providing some technical assistance to help local staff fill out the scorecards to determine where everyone's at in complying with that. And the Napa Sonoma Collaborative is also helping. So compliance scores should be available soon. The first reports we're hearing is that everyone should be in partial appliance and should be able to access the funding associated with that compliance. Moving on to the Priority Conservation Area Program, MDC and ABAG and our staff have worked with local agencies, including the Open Space District, regional parks, and local jurisdictions to update PCA boundaries and nominate some new priority conservation areas. And then there'll be a new PCA grant call for projects sometime in the next month or two. Moving on to transit integration. So the mascot survey wrapped up in August, receiving over 700 completed surveys. So a lot of good feedback on that effort. 4 open house meetings were held as part of that outreach, 2 virtual meetings and several pop-up table events were also held between July and August to gather feedback on the mascot's draft plan. Feedback's being processed right now and will be used to revise the final plan, but only minor revisions are expected for Sonoma County. Moving to bike share, the full fleet of 300 bikes is now deployed in the system. There are some smaller hubs and drop zones added in Santa Rosa, Rohnert Park, and Cotati. And a bit of good news, ridership in June and July was up 50 to 64% over April. So some good usage of that bike share system. We're happy to see that. Ross mentioned commute rewards and Diamond Dozen associated with the HOV system. So I'll skip that so you don't hear it twice and wrap up and would be happy to take any comments or answer any questions at this time.
Any questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, thank you so much, Chris, for the report. Next up, we have Shauna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, directors. Ross covered the HOV lanes, so I won't cover that part. He also covered the ribbon cutting ceremony, which is for MSNB 7, which is pretty exciting. I'd just like to remind you that we are going to have continuous HOV lanes from the Richardson Bay Bridge all the way to Windsor. And so I want you to mark your calendars for that one on October 3rd. Just a couple of other highlights for you. For the 116, 121 intersection improvements, the contractor is completing work on excavation and construction of the median islands and coordinating with Caltrans on traffic closures and detours that will be needed for the final paving of the roundabout in late September. And a ribbon cutting ceremony for that project is tentatively planned for October 24th. And then on the Hearn Avenue interchange project, the contractor is preparing for a deck pour of the second bridge scheduled for next week and is working for substantial completion of and opening of the bridge by the end of the year. So that is, of course, weather dependent, and the ribbon cutting ceremony has yet to be set for that one. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, are there any comments from members of the public in person on any of those items? Seeing none, anyone online?
No online comments.
All right, and with that, we'll move on to announcements. Everyone have anything they want to share? Director Okrepke.
Yeah, this Friday at Sally Tomatoes is the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition's Golden Spoke Awards. And for the first time ever, they're giving out a Civic Bike Leaders of the Year Award, and it is going to Dan Hennessy, Tarina Wilson, and Alexander Oseguera from our Transportation and Public Works Department for all the work they've done for bike-friendly development in the city of Santa Rosa. It's the first time they've ever given it to government employees for being champions for the bicycle community.
It's awesome. Anyone else? Announcement? Going what? Okay.
Piggyback on that, Smart is also moving forward. Project of the year. The expansions of the bicycle path. And Christine Trover from my office is getting a lifetime award.
That's awesome. With that, is there any, let's see, this is public comment on closed session items, but I don't think that applies, right? Okay, yeah, it does. Okay, no worries. With that, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.